Hello and welcome to One Star Bazaar. Once more, we are reviewing the movies that critics hate. This week, we will be doing the film Chain Reaction. This is a 1990s action science flick directed by Andrew Davis, written by Josh Freeman, Rick Seaman, Michael Bortman, and J.F. Lawton. It was released in theaters on August 2nd, 1996, and stars Keanu Reeves, Morgan Freeman, and Rachel Weisz.
Is it Vice or Vise?
I was going to say, is it Weisz or Weiss, but
I know it's not Weiss.
I think it's Weisz.
We could research it, but whatever.
It's,
mispronouncing names is
chick
like a thing.
from The Mummy.
She's lovely. Married to James Bond.
Daniel Craig?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. This movie has a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes.
And I tried to find it on Metacritic, and I couldn't. It's like it doesn't exist. So if you can find it, props to you. I couldn't find it.
It's not that obscure either. I remember when this movie came out.
Yeah, no, I could not find it. So the summary for this movie, I think it's a studio-provided summary, but I'm not positive. Two researchers in a green alternative energy project are put on the run when they are framed for murder and treason.
Ooh. That's it?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds more like a tagline. So Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said, "It's not a bad film in individual moments and in the energy of its performances, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense." Jeff Miller of the Houston Chronicle said, "The narrative is very complex, but what's on the screen is little more than generic, non-narrative specific guy being chased stuff." And Eric Brace of the Washington Post said, "Plotting and predictable and a big disappointment." So as usual, we'll go ahead and watch the movie and then may or may not have little snippets or thoughts of what we thought while watching it. And then we'll delve into our in-depth review. Okay, so this movie came out over 20 years ago.
Yes.
And the opening scene is a professor up on a stage talking about climate change and how we have to move away from coal and be a more green.
I mean, I don't know if specifically it's climate change is the reasoning, but it is essentially talking about how we can't live on
fossil fuels forever.
Yeah.
And nothing has changed in 20 years.
Pretty much. Okay, so we're 15 minutes into this movie.
Yes.
And essentially, what is essentially a small nuke has just exploded in Chicago.
Yes.
So that is the kind of movie that this is going to be.
I mean, how do you go up from a nuke?
I'm confused.
I am also confused. Well, okay, so they've built this thing.
Cold fusion is essentially what they're working on.
And now somehow bad guys have been alerted of this.
Yes.
And they come and blow it up.
Yes. Okay, here's my hot take reaction about almost a third of the way through the movie, right?
Yes.
So essentially, the main character is being framed by the bad guys, and we don't know why yet. They're being framed for murder and treason and stealing of the cold fusion project secrets, whatever. So they're on the run. So this movie is basically a crappy version of The Fugitive. It kind of bothers me because it seems like just blatant ripoff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 Have you seen The Fugitive?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen The Fugitive.
Okay.
I have not.
See,
I did not live under
movie.
a rock. All right. So we've watched Chain Reaction. And we'll just go ahead and get into our categories here. How was the acting?
I mean, the acting wasn't the problem. It is Keanu Reeves. It's a Keanu Reeves film. So, not amazing,
yeah.
Right? I don't think anyone thinks Keanu Reeves is one of the greatest actors.
True.
But he is a passable actor. And he just always kind of has that same persona.
Yeah.
Right? He definitely had that here, I think.
Yes. And I think we're going to kind of touch on the biggest problems with this movie is, does the story make sense?
No. I mean, it's not that, here's the thing. It's not that the story doesn't make sense. It's that it just...
So I feel like the only reason we knew what was going on is because it's so formulaic.
Right.
It really doesn't explain much of anything.
No.
And yeah, you only know what's going on because you've seen this type of story before.
Right.
But
like, you know who the bad guy is going to be. You kind of know what the motivation is, but not really.
We really don't.
No, I know, but like you can kind of just assume.
Yeah.
It's so formulaic that if you've seen enough movies, your mind will just naturally fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
To try to make sense of it. But if you don't have that, there's a lot of blanks. Like it's so no, the story sucks. It's not even a matter of does it make sense or not. It's just that it sucks.
Yes.
Right.
And in terms of whether or not it's engaging, I feel like parts of it might be, but like it's really long. Like, or
it's not even that long. It's like an hour and 45 minutes.
It feels long.
It feels like nothing happens.
Yeah.
Except lots of running.
Yeah.
Keanu Reeves is running for half of this movie.
There's more running in this movie than there is in Forrest Gump, which is a lot of running.
It really is The Fugitive. It is a Fugitive knockoff.
I think we can agree that this movie did a lot of things poorly.
Yes.
So is there anything this movie did well?
I mean, not really. Because even the action was kind of boring. The action was just chase sequences.
Okay, but have you ever seen a chase scene involving a swamp boat on a frozen body of water and a helicopter?
No, but that doesn't mean that I need that in my movie watching life.
There were some fun cameos, or not cameos, like they were roles for these people. Yeah,
this movie is over 20 years old, so it was interesting to see a couple actors.
Like a teenage Michael Shannon.
Yeah, like a couple actors that went on to become more famous.
Yeah. And then there's the janitor from Scrubs. I'm sorry, I don't know his name.
Yes. This is apparently Rachel Weisz's
their first Hollywood movie.
Film.
I feel like I'm much more forgiving of movies than I should be for some things, but I'm kind of wishing we didn't watch this.
Really? It's that bad?
I feel like it
was a huge waste of time.
I feel like it might have been. What do you think?
I can understand that. I don't know if I'm automatically there because it really takes a lot for me to wish I had never watched a movie.
I mean, like, I don't wish I had my life back, but I wish we'd watch something else. Maybe.
Right. You're like, you wish you had known if you had seen bits and pieces of this before and been like, nah, or had somebody tell you, no, trust me, it's not worth it.
Yeah, so I feel like if we were going to recommend whether or not people should watch this
definitely
movie,
don't watch this
don't
movie.
watch it.
No, there's no point. No, this is one of those movies where it's just filler. It's like, oh, I remember that movie coming out. I never saw it. It's irrelevant. No one cares. No one needs to see it.
There's definitely ways to do this kind of movie well.
Right.
And I can't maybe it's because this movie had like 4 writers and like none of them could agree on
like how to make it exciting.
And I don't know, like there's no way all 4 of them were writing it at the same time. So like did some of them get fired and then other ones came on?
Or like one of them wrote the main story and the other ones worked on doctoring stuff.
Yeah, or when tweaked the dialogue.
Maybe 2 of them wrote it together.
And the dialogue is like... For being a movie about science, they use like 0 science words.
I know that's one thing that struck me right away is there was no explanation about how their device worked.
All we know is it makes water really hot. So yeah, it's this giant tank of bubbling water, and there's lasers crisscrossy bouncing through it. And then somehow that's supposed to make magical energy that produces more hydrogen than is in the water.
Okay, so I think what it is supposed to be. This is based on my knowledge of how science works. And you're totally right. This movie did absolutely nothing to explain anything scientific.
Yeah.
I think it was just like, yeah, it's fusion. Just go with it, man.
It's just clean energy.
Basically, I mean, setting aside the fusion part, which totally is not viable yet, but it's certainly something that's been I've heard since we were kids, right? It's been the thing. That's the future. That's the ultimate unicorn gold.
What other movie was that the thing in when they were trying to make cold fusion and it resulted in some sort of terrorist thing or chase thing?
I don't know.
I'll have to Google it.
Okay.
Anyway, but yes, this movie, just very little explanation. And then you had a thing you wanted to rip on when it comes to the exposition.
Yeah. So with exposition, we talked about in one of our previous episodes, poor exposition.
Yes.
And how you don't want to just beat your audience over the head.
It was in Bright.
You got to be subtle enough. I mean, you can come out and say it specifically, you know, here's some information we need the audience to know. So have one character tell the other. That's fine. However you want to introduce it. The problem I had in this movie is that the FBI just magically knows the right thing. The FBI is just like, hey, I'm going to take a stab in the dark and then it's going to be this. Yup, it was that. What? Why? It didn't. That irritates me greatly.
Okay, so the movie that is also about cold fusion is...
Did you just Google movies about cold fusion, by the way?
Yes, I did, but there aren't that many. So.
Okay, I'm sure there's not.
So it was The Saint.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which came out a year after this movie.
Which I believe they're remaking, aren't they?
Supposedly, yeah.
Yes.
So you have Val Kilmer, Elizabeth Shue.
Right.
In that one, I'm pretty sure the Russians are the bad guys.
Right. And they're trying to steal the cold fusion technology.
And that one has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. So is deep in our 1-star category.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, okay, so you know how, I mean, technically they do it a little bit less nowadays, but how back in the 90s, there was always like a back-to-back studio release of the same type of movie. So Deep Impact and Armageddon.
Yes.
And
Dante's Peak
and Volcano.
Yes.
And other ones that are escaping me at the moment.
There's a few.
So I'm wondering if this was one of those situations where it was like, oh, let's all make movies about cold fusion.
And to be clear, I'm pretty sure that it's not that they were collaborating and saying, hey, let's release.
Oh, no,
it was
ripping
one
off
studio
each other.
going, hey, they're making a movie about this. Let's try to beat them to, to market.
Or Bug's Life and Ants.
Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I wonder if that's what happened.
It could be.
Although I guess The Saint is technically based on a
TV
book
show
/ TV show. But yeah, it seems like cold fusion is not a popular movie topic of the 90s, as far as I can tell from Google.
Well, it's not real.
What?
So, I mean,
movies aren't real?
I'm just saying, like, way more movies are going to be based on actual ideas and real thing. You know, people get murdered all the time. That's why mysteries about murder are very prevalent on TV and in books and in movies and everything.
Yeah. So
people stealing cold fusion plans to fund terrorist groups doesn't happen all the time or whatever.
It's not even a terrorist group.
I know. I'm not talking about this movie.
This movie is oof. So I think a lot of these critic sections were completely on point. It's very predictable. And the story really doesn't make any sense at all. And the one guy from the Houston Chronicle was like, the narrative is very complex. It's not complex. It's like non-existent. Like there's no explanation of anything whatsoever.
No, there's not.
There's like hardly a narrative. Besides the there's the thing and they're being framed for the thing and now run away.
Yeah.
That's not a story.
Right.
So
all I kept thinking in the middle of this movie was how much more exciting this movie would be if Keanu Reeves was just going through killing people. And I guess that's just because, like, John Wick is awesome. But, like, seriously, all he does is run, and it's boring.
So much
In John
fun.
Wick, all he does is chase, and it's exciting, and
boring.
kill people along the way that he's chasing.
That's
and
true.
it's super awesome.
There should have been more.
And in the case of John Wick, that has a very simple story. It's not hard to comprehend what he wants, what he's going for.
But he wants revenge.
And, you know, it's weird how... So, yeah, this is complex, but terrible.
Yeah.
Because it's complex needlessly. It's complex for the sake of complexity, and you're like, what? Whereas a movie like John Wick... or even The Fugitive, is simple but good, which basically it's very elegant.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in The Fugitive, he's like, oh, I didn't kill my wife. I'm going to run away and figure out how I can prove that I didn't kill my wife. It's very clear what his goal is.
Yes.
In John Wick, it's very clear what his goal is. In this movie, you're like, you don't even know what the bad guy... I don't even know what the bad guy's goals were at the end of the movie. Interestingly enough, this movie is also very 90s just based on the look. I just remember...
Yes.
I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's the fashion. I don't know if it's the film quality. I don't know if it's just the lighting that was really prevalent in Hollywood films. But I'm like, this movie... I don't know if it's that it's Morgan Freeman, but this movie, the look of it reminded me of like Kiss the Girls or Along Came a Spider, where Morgan Freeman plays a detective.
And like early X-Files.
Yeah, like it was just very kind of 90. I don't know how to describe it. It just looks 90s.
And so many references and jokes about fax machines.
There was there were lots
like
of fax machines.
5 fax machine jokes. But yes, I think our main overall impression of this movie is do not watch it.
No, skip it.
It's not that it's like it's not one of the worst movies we've ever seen.
No.
But it just doesn't have enough redeeming qualities to make it worth watching.
Like I honestly can't think of anything that stood out that it did well.
Yeah.
And, you know, is the problem, do you think that it is just kind of a generic kind of action thriller drama? Is it the genre is the problem there?
I don't think it is, because there are so many of those types of movies that are critically acclaimed.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, so for example, last week we watched All About Steve.
Yes.
Which is a comedy.
Yes.
And even though it's bad, there are some redeeming values in the sense that there are comedic moments.
Yeah.
And so there is something you do kind of remember, like, oh, I remember laughing at a few things. So like that was, you know, there was some enjoyment to be gleaned.
I see.
With this, because it's not comedy. There's no like traditional action movie action. There's no gunfights. There's no car chases. There's no, there are explosions, but the explosions are like more plot device explosions versus.
Yeah. They're not action explosions. Yeah, they drive the plot.
Yeah, like, oh, we got to cover our tracks, so let's blow up the house.
And even the chase stuff, it's just Keanu Reeves running.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So is it just, it's almost like this type of movie, when it's done bad, is worse. Yeah. Because there's not really anything that you can take away where you're like, oh, well, at least I enjoyed that part, or at least I enjoyed these sequences. Like, I've seen some bad action movies, but usually you're like, oh, okay, perfect example. Batman versus Superman. That is a bad movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember in theaters watching Batman versus Superman alone because you didn't want to go see it because it was not good. And when Wonder Woman shows up and there's action scenes where she joins the fight, I remember liking it. And I remember specifically thinking, that's cool. There's, one spot where I was like, oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember thinking, damn, like, at least Zack Snyder knows how to direct an action scene.
It's true.
Like, I don't think he's a good director, but at least he knows how to make exciting scenes excite. Right?
Yes.
And so even there, I'm like, it's like if we were doing Batman versus Superman and you said, well, what did it do well? I would say a lot of the action scenes at the end were really awesome.
Yeah, this movie's kind of...
This movie is, what did it do well? Not like it didn't explain the story.
No.
It's very dated.
Yes.
Could this movie have been saved if there was more action? Or would you still be like, nah, it's still awful?
The biggest problem with this movie is the story. And I feel like if you added more action,
you'd still have a crappy story.
Still have a crappy story.
Yeah, true.
What does it say when there's a helicopter chase scene and you're still just bored?
That's true.
Just don't watch this movie. That's all we can say.
And
it's not good. And then I did have a funny note to myself that I forgot to record while we were watching the movie. But I think the reason Roger Ebert gave this movie a slightly positive review is because it takes place in Chicago. And there is a part where they are blatantly reading the Chicago Sun-Times, which is the newspaper that Roger Ebert was the critic for.
That's true.
So it's a conspiracy.
And you know what? He's dead, so there's no way for him to refute that.
Prove it.
So who knows?
You heard it here first.
Well.
Swayed by product placements. Just don't watch the movie. Just don't watch it.
This movie is destined to just be filler movie on streaming services, right?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people complain about Netflix originals and how like a lot of their stuff is crap because it's just filler meant to just expand on their catalog.
It's good.
A lot of it's crap. Some of it's good. Some of it's crap. Okay, fine. Some of it's crap.
I haven't watched enough of it to say it's crap.
I've just seen comments on, nerds on the internet saying a lot of it's crap. Okay, I'll just say some of it is crap. The point is it's filler. They just need content. They just we don't care as long as you're watching, as long as you're subscribing. So this movie is kind of like some of it's crap, but it's just meant to be filler just to have a big catalog.
So in terms of book publishing, there's this theory, or not theory, it's a practice about, so basically every publishing house has these big, equivalent blockbuster books that are coming out.
Sure. And
in between those big books, they'll just publish whatever the hell to fill up the space.
Sure.
And maybe, they'll sell a couple copies or whatever, but really the majority of their big bucks is going to come from those blockbuster books.
Sure.
And yeah, this is like that. Studios have the same philosophy.
Well, yeah, think about the library. Yeah. Okay, so the library, what percentage of the books in the library are good books?
No, I don't know. 10%?
10, 20, whatever. Maybe even 30% would be books where you're like, oh yeah, I gotta, somebody's going to recommend it, or you're going to pick it up and go, oh, I love this. I got to read everything by this author, whatever. A lot of it is just, there's only so many. You can only watch all the great ones until you've done it all, or read all the great books, watch all the great movies until you're done. What else you got? Well, there's this crap, but it's crap.
Yeah.
It's not good.
It's filler crap. Thank you for listening to One Star Bazaar. As always, you can let us know what you think or make suggestions for what we should watch next by reaching out on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at One Star Bazaar. You can visit our Patreon page to contribute to the podcast if you like what we're doing. Please rate and subscribe if you're willing. It helps us out and lets us know you're listening. Next week, we have an exciting episode planned for you.
Is it exciting?
I don't know.
Next week, we'll be looking at a drama
A drama?
Next week we will be watching a typical dramatic film. We've done a lot of different genre films so far, and I think this is probably our first legit real-world drama. I believe it is also Kevin Spacey's final, most likely, film, and pretty much a financial failure. So we'll see just how bad it can be.
Sounds great. Join us next week.